In frame? Cool. Hey, this is episode 4. Yes, 4. And today we have Jeffrey. Jeffrey, introduce yourself real quick.
For sure, yeah. I'm a working DP in Gaffer here in Greenville, South Carolina. Been here for about 3 years now, so still newer to the area, but kind of developing community and crew and doing my thing.
Yeah. And why is Jeffrey here on the Indie Film Hub podcast, which you can look us up for show notes and comments and everything like that in hello.indiefilmhub@gmail.com. But why is he here today? He is here because
we wear baseball caps.
He
That's
spent
why.
all of his money. He spent all of his money on gear and has tried everything pretty much, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're talking about gear. What do you really need? Like, what helps in what situations, and what do you need to get started? So, so first question, like, what did you start with? How did you get into the game gear-wise?
Yeah, the first camera that I really started doing it was first one of those handy cameras with the tape, but it broke about 2 weeks into having
little mini DV thing.
Oh yeah, little mini DV tapes.
I started on that with iMovie when you had to batch capture all of the stuff.
Yep, batch capture and all that. Won't go too much into that, but I started off with the Canon T2i. But what's hilarious is why I think it's interesting is back then I remember getting on one of my very first shoots. It was like a corporate shoot. And I don't remember what model it was, but it was another Canon cinema camera that the guy had set up. He had spent like $4,000 or $5,000, maybe 4 months before this shoot. Gone to the nines on his camera setup and whatnot. We get all the cameras set up. We go through our shoot, and he comes back, and we're chatting about it later. And he told me, he was like, "Seriously, your $400-500 camera looks quite a bit better than what I just spent my money on." But I just thought it was interesting. At least that point in time, this was like right as DSLRs were making their come in and doing their stuff. However, the camera he had was feature rich in the sense of it had the IO that you need, audio, all this other, so all the stuff that makes it a pro camera. However, when it just came down purely to image, it was actually better at that point. So, so that was the first thing I started on.
Yeah.
So, just as an adage of,
does that still hold true today? That was like when technology was still early on, but now has there been created a chasm of quality?
I don't think I think the chasm's smaller.
Yeah.
It's feature set now.
Especially with iPhone 15 comparison to the Alexa.
I don't like it, but I get it. I don't like it, but I get it.
So, aside from impressing the client with a big rig, gear doesn't matter, and that's the end of the episode. We're there. So yeah.
Although I don't fully agree with that.
Shoot on whatever you can. So the common saying...
That's what I agree with. Shoot on whatever you have.
Yeah, the common saying is the best camera is the camera you have.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But if you can get a better camera,
always.
Would you recommend it?
Yeah.
And it's not always about camera gear. There's so much gear that goes into it. You've collected quite an assortment. You've got a little over a ton of just everything.
Mm-hmm.
And in your van, what was the trickle effect there of slowly collecting all the gear you have?
Yeah, so kind of the journey in developing out a full 1-ton package started from the fact of, I think, and this happens for a lot of people, is that you see things that you want to try. And I think a lot of us hope, like, maybe I'll get on a shoot where I can try that follow focus, or I can try this. I mean, to be honest, it got down to, I want to know how to use it, so I'm just going to have to buy it. And this came to more basic stuff. This actually went more to grip type things, because you can somebody is always going to buy the coolest camera, and you'll probably get to use it. However, when it comes to like the basics of, especially controlling light, that's the type of stuff that essentially they've been using the same things for 70, 80 years, like a C-stand. The reason some people say it's a C-stand because it's called a century stand, so it's supposed to last you forever. But yeah, so there's these fundamentals of film equipment that last a long time. So I'm noticing that, and I'm like, man, I really want to use it, so I'm gonna have to freaking buy the thing to figure it out. Like, per se, even with pieces of diffusion, you have so many. You have frosts, you have magic cloth, you have grid cloth, you have all this stuff. And I would go online trying to figure out like, what do I do with all of this stuff? You can watch comparisons or whatnot, but to be honest, the only way to really know before you get on set, because the problem is you really don't want to experiment while you're getting paid. So the philosophy was I'll go buy it and get my hands on this stuff before trying to get somewhere. And somebody's like, well, what do you want to use? And being like, I'm not sure because I've never used it before. So, so that was kind of the beginning urge.
That's the case for everybody. Like it seems that they just haven't had access to or their hands on. So aside from just like outright buying everything, which can get shoots up real quick because you get your cinema camera, but then you got to kit it out. Then you got to get extra batteries, extra cards, and then you got to get the filters for it. And then, so you just buy one piece and it's a domino effect. But I mean, did you have any other ways of like getting your hands on some of this stuff before being able to purchase it?
Yeah, I know you see a lot of people talking about renting gear for shoots and stuff. And I did that a few times. It's just a bummer though, when you're working in a world where your margins are really small. Like if you're trying to make money, you're sitting there looking at, I'm getting paid $500 for this video. And if I spend $100 on the rentals that I need for it, that's $100 I didn't get. And it sounds very small depending on what scale you're on. But when you're looking at it at the end of the day, you're like, that's $100 in my pocket if I don't rent it out. So I know that's the recommendation sometimes. I think for me, it was having to actually buy the basics of the kit. So like your camera, your tripod, and your whatever, but then just figuring out what was like a DIY solution before trying to spend money on something. So let's just say with the Fusion, literally trying curtains, like shower curtains, and seeing if those can be diffusion. And
Film Riot had a ton of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And I actually think it is very beneficial to go out and use that stuff, because even when you get to the more professional equipment, if you're playing around with DIY stuff, you understand what the more expensive stuff is supposed to do. So you get the principle from using.
And it makes you good at troubleshooting.
Oh, no. That's super true, because the problem I find with people who have only ever used high quality film equipment is that when they come up with a problem that they don't have the exact piece for, like I don't have a L-shaped bracket for this one thing, and they're just like, well, we can't do it. But if you've had to DIY enough things, you're like, no, I have 3 other pieces that aren't made for it. However, I know if I stick the 3 pieces together, cool, we're good to go.
Yeah, so indie filmmakers play around with everything.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty much. Another way for experience and hands-on stuff is, I mean, PAing, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, did you PA? Did you go on sets and have someone teach you some of these things?
Yeah, I don't think there was ever the like, this person taught me everything. But yeah, just trying to get on shoots as much as possible. And I know everybody's valuable. However, at the beginning, you're not. When you're first starting out, you're not viable. You're actually probably causing somebody a little bit of extra time. Maybe you might do a couple things helpful, but at some point you're going to ask a couple questions that slows everything down. So the initial amount of being able to get my hands on stuff, was a lot of times on shoots, and realizing that somebody was giving me a shot. So making sure that they're not privileged to have me. I'm privileged to go work with them.
Yeah.
Now, at some point, you're going to have to make money for sure. But at the beginning, that's the way that I like to view it.
Yeah. In all the episodes, we've been saying pretty much, though, even if you are in that situation, most people in the community really like teaching, like helping the next generation come up through the ranks or whatever. I mean, you would agree with that?
Yeah.
The part that everyone's going to ask about, money, though. Yeah. The stuff's expensive. What is the core thing that people can get by with?
Yeah, so I would say your core kit, you're going to have a camera.
And this is, let me preface, this is to do like videography solo.
Yeah.
If you're going to do, let's say an interview, because that's like 75% of the work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the pretense of what you would need for. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and obviously with that kit, you can do a lot of stuff. But so obviously you're gonna have to figure out what your camera is. Probably gonna have to get a tripod for it, and then your audio solution, which there's a lot of nice cheap options nowadays, but you're gonna have to figure out audio, and then You don't have to. This is not a have to, but it's a high recommendation that you start working on your lighting, because it's interesting to find people who have been doing work for a lot of years and they're like, man, I just don't know how to light. And that's a massive part of it. They're like, well, I'll use natural lighting. And that's only going to get you so far. But yeah, so your basic kit, camera, tripod, audio, and then hopefully some lights. And what those lights can look like, what I used for the first like 2 years was these little soft boxes where you have to screw in the light bulb.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They have the little, and they were such a pain. They were honestly, 4 of them could take 30 minutes for me to set up. And that was after a year
They
of
don't pack up really well.
No, they don't pack up very well either. But I used it for a bunch of times, and it was the basics of learning 3-point lighting, because I got 4 of them for maybe $60 or something like that. Now they were a pain, and I hated them every time. However,
luckily it's pretty much changed from that. It's all cheap LED stuff.
Yeah. Thankfully now it's gotten a little bit better with that stuff. But I mean, even what was nice about those is that the source got to be bigger than a lot of little things you'll buy now. And I would say that's the biggest thing too when you want to buy your first piece of lighting gear. Is there's a couple different styles of lights that they have. For basic, is you have your center, what's called a COB, which is a single point light, which is going to allow you to do more creative things with it, but now it's going to take more time because you have such a small point of light. You don't want to use it most of the time while you're filming. So you want to do something to spread it out. That's the most versatile light with the most work. And then you have LED panels.
So COB, chip on board.
Yep.
That's your mono light.
Yep.
The bigger lights that people will put a big Bowens mount filter on front of, just to clarify.
Yeah, exactly. And those, thankfully, on the low end, you can get some of those very cheap. Like there's a Godox, I think it was the S60, that was 40 or 50 bucks that I used for a really long time, 60-watt light. But it was a great start with a little Bowens mount.
I just sold some used, so people it's great. Get them used too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And what's great is a lot of this gear can be gotten used. I know some people are like stringent of like, you have to buy brand new gear, but I mean, even out of my professional stuff, 50% of it is all used gear. And it still keeps going. As long as you check it out, I've never had a used piece of gear go bad.
Yeah.
So outside of abuse.
So camera, lighting, audio, tripod, lenses, obviously.
And a light source.
What is where would you put most of your preference in? So for me, like I would put most of my preference in audio. I feel like you can get away with bad video, but audio has to be good. But I feel like you as a gaffer, maybe you would say lighting or lenses even.
Yeah, for me right now, but it's because I've thrown the most, you value what you spend the most money on.
Yeah.
And so at this point, I've spent the most money on lights right now. And so I view that as like a high priority. Although on a fundamentals, I would agree that actually your audio should come first. Your audio quality actually should be the foundation, and then you build image, and then you build lighting.
So spend a little bit more on your audio.
Yeah, and it sucks,
first.
but it's like I have a Rode NTG3 that has been going for a decade. It was a $1,200 mic. Oh, it sucked buying that. It sucked, especially early on, where I think it was more expensive than the camera that I owned. However, just died 2 weeks ago, but that's like 10 years I've had.
Workhorse for sure.
Yeah, it was a very good mic and it got me through a lot of stuff. So yeah, if you want to actually do the right thing, spend it on audio. However, it's not going to feel as good as buying a camera or a lens.
I have some YouTube videos up there, and my most popular one is obviously the gear videos.
Yeah,
like gear envy, gear heads, whatever you want to call them.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't people put more time into learning how to run a business or marketing or communication or just storytelling?
Well, my theory on that would be because it's the easiest to give yourself a reason why you're not better. Because if you look at if you look at gear, your reasoning in your mind is, oh, my stuff doesn't look as good because I don't have that. That's not the reality. Yeah. The reality is not that. And I mean, I 100% I get caught up in that. I look at like a bigger source of lighting, or, oh man, if I only had the strongest light so that I could stick them out the window, then my stuff would look so much better. But I think the reason that gear videos do so well on YouTube and stuff is because it's not reinforcing, but it feeds into the idea that people have of like, oh man, yeah, the reason I'm not actually better is because that piece of gear, I don't have that piece of gear. So yeah, I would be better. And like, I mean, the YouTube person, they'll start off a gear review of like, gear doesn't matter, and then give you all the reasons why this piece of gear really matters. So, yeah, that would be my personal opinion on the popularity of that stuff. When the reality is, I think there's a way bigger value on networking and like career building stuff.
Yeah, networking, being able to find people to hire or work with.
Yeah, because I
For sure.
mean, and this was true in Hollywood. Some of the people that I met in LA, they were the worst at their craft. They just like, if you have a scale of what you need to just enter and then excellent, they would just get on the scale of being able to work. But because they were very highly relational, they would go way farther than everybody else. And then I met dudes that were so talented, but didn't connect with people, didn't spend time with them. And so they just went nowhere.
For you, that you've invested in equipment, have you've seen obviously the return of being able to use it through rentals, through being hired because you have gear?
Mm-hmm.
Is that suggested for everybody, or would you rather say hold off on gear as long as you can, try to do whatever you can without it?
I wish this answer wasn't true, but you will get hired for the gear that you have. Yeah. Because it communicates something. And this is just an optics thing. I don't know if it's not, if you have a high relational status with somebody, it's not there. When you have no relationship with somebody, the equipment you have is now your in, especially on the side of a crew person. If you are more in a producer or director type role, obviously it doesn't matter. But once you start getting lower and lower down as a person who has equipment, all they're really looking at is they just want to see the spreadsheet of what you have look really good, which super sucks because there's been times I've been able to show up with half of the equipment someone else has and make it look better than them. However, when a DP is coming into town and he's looking for a package, he probably isn't going to look at previous work that you've done. All he's going to look at is what do you have. Understandably, because they're the ones bringing in the experience and they'll tell you what to do. But it's a little frustrating.
Yeah. And do you often get hired on when renting your gear, or?
Yeah, so right now it's a 50-50. So I have the 1-ton package. And so I have a couple people who I've been able to show how to use everything inside of it. So sometimes I'm going out with it and sometimes I'm able to send somebody else, which is actually the ideal world for me. I would love to create work for somebody else. And so when somebody else goes out with a truck, they get paid, I get paid, and I get a rental fee from the whole thing. So it feels like it's the best of both worlds.
Do you get hired without your gear?
No. So that is one thing for me that, especially since it's all in a truck, I'll do individual rentals though. So I'll do lamp heads and whatnot. But right now I don't do the truck just because there's too much stuff. And there's like, if somebody pulled everything out of that truck at the end of the day and tried to put it back in, I would have a nightmare.
I mean, do you get hired out without your gear?
Oh, do I get hired? Yes, yeah, that happens quite a bit. And I mean, this is also a relational thing too, is sometimes I'll show up, so I won't get paid for the van, I'll get paid for myself. And I'll show up with it just to try to figure out what's a value add, if they have budget on something cool. However, you've already gotten onto the shoot, you're already gonna get paid a certain amount. Now, you don't want them taking advantage of you at all. However, if you add more value to a shoot, hopefully it's going to pay off later for somebody to be like, oh man, that guy really, he brought all this stuff that we really was helpful. He didn't charge us for it. So maybe next time when we're in town, we need to do something. Oh yeah, let's get his whole rig and do this guy right.
Yeah, that's good. And you really stick in people's minds when you do have gear, like you were saying before, but we're like in the Greenville area, South Carolina. There's really only like 3 people that you can really call that have the full kit to be able to bring on set and not have to pull from several different sources.
Yeah.
And be able to, light your whole scene, unless you're like an independent ad agency that has your own gear or something like that, but they don't rent it out.
Yeah. Which is actually a fairly common thing, at least for our area, is that most people are just going to own it themselves. So I would say 80% of the people I get to work with are coming out of town who literally can't drive with all the equipment themselves. So it's like it's an interesting spot for myself. So I don't get to work with local people as much as people just coming into town when it comes to the full, like paying for the whole thing. I work much more locally as an individual without the gear.
How would you feel about someone else putting the investment in and getting gear to be available in the area as well?
On what scale?
Yeah.
Of the like they're going with $200,000 or the guy who's got 5,000 to put in?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, do you mind answering how much you've put into so far?
I have about 40K inside of the van right now.
Yeah.
So, and that's over about 5-6 years.
That's nuts.
So, and I mean, and this is something that's a little depends on who you are. My philosophy has been I don't want to do anything off of debt. So it's progressive. And initially when I had the van, like it didn't look very cool because I didn't have it filled. It doesn't look
you
as
buy a bigger house, you got to fill it with furniture.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But I mean, it like sometimes you kind of get the weird stares or whatever when it's like, oh, okay, are you actually legit? Because like I only see half the stuff in this van. Now it's packed out and looks awesome. Yeah. But I kind of purposely said I would rather not go into debt doing that. I'll just slowly, and a lot of it too is buying cheaper versions until I have the money to sell that and get something better.
So Jeffrey has also done a walkthrough of his van with us. And if you go to our YouTube page, Indie Film Hub, you'll see that attached to this video. You can go see everything he's got in his van, the walkthrough, how he's got laid out and stuff like that, and why he has certain pieces. Good little video there. So if you want to see that, go to the YouTube page, check it out. Maybe I should do it as a separate video so it's not, people can just find it separately. But it will also be in the show notes on our website. Have you seen any like diminishing returns for your stuff? Like at some point, there's just no reason to get more gear. Or certain pieces of gear.
I would say when you're not specializing in an area. So at this point, it doesn't make sense for me to spend more money on audio. So I've got the basic kit of audio that gets me as far as I need. Now, if I wanted to become an audio person, I would 100% have to get better things than what I currently have. But since that's not where I want to spend time and energy, and even like, let's just say, I would preferably be doing DP work, but I haven't been spending much money on cameras and stuff. But it's mostly because I feel that the lighting is adding so much value to the camera stuff that I'm just trying to wait that out a little bit longer. But yeah, I would say it's mostly once you have a certain basic kit together, and you start knowing what you're going to specialize in, then spending extra money is kind of in the world of like, is this actually going to return that much value for you or not? And you kind of just find stuff out the hard way too. If you buy something for $1,000 and 2 years later, you're like, holy cow, I used it once.
I have definitely bought stuff I just did not use. I think I made a video on it too.
Oh.
Go to our YouTube page and find it.
Can you think of any of the pieces that were like the biggest expense that you're like, wow, I never touched it again?
Well, like I had Christmas gifts for like the phone gimbal that I've used like 5 times.
Oh man, GoPro, I have a love-hate with gimbals.
Yeah, the GoPro 360. I got that. It's super cool, but it's just like it's such a
niche.
Specific, yeah.
It's very niche.
And I would have used it more, but like the regular 1080 straight view instead of the 360 view is not that great. So you just find things out. I wonder if the Theta 360 or whatever the other one is, would be nicer. But the what's the biggest thing that I bought that I didn't use? Probably some lights. I got through a little bit because I purchased stuff for the guy I was white labeling through, and I was like, crap, that's the wrong thing. So for myself, I bought the right thing.
That's so funny.
So one of them was like a big diffusion thing, and I was like, you're supposed to have the largest, softest source you can have. That's key for lighting, but I bought this thing that doesn't collapse. So I was just shoving this huge thing in the back of my trunk to bring to interviews, and it just was not good. So yeah, the next one I bought was smaller and collapsible.
Yeah,
and much better for everything. Anyways, but it was a nice light. It's just or diffusion, the little octabox.
Yeah,
stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the trouble with some gear is that it can be really good, but because of its impracticality, it just never gets used very often. Like I'd say these are cheaper ones, but I have lanterns, which like they're really good, and in the right situation, they're awesome. And the most expensive one I have is like $400. And that one's gotten pulled out twice because it's so hard to find the scenario.
Yeah.
Now, it's so interesting though, because like when you finally find that one spot, you're like, oh, I'm so happy I have this piece of kit. But that's one of those hard ones that justifiably now I'm just like, that particular piece has not paid itself off. Yeah.
Is there like a minimum value? Like obviously don't buy the cheapest thing you can find sometimes, because it just doesn't look, well, some of the cheap stuff is actually done really well, but
yeah,
there are some things you would say just avoid.
Yeah. Tripod. Yeah, don't get the cheapest tripod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little wiggly wobbly thing.
Yeah, that one's pretty annoying, is when there's a pretty minimum viable option, and when you go below that, I would say you have to spend at least $100. Like the small rig tripod and stuff, those are like $150 and they're not bad, but show up with like a $30-$40 one and you breathe on it and that one's sad.
I worked at the camera store for a bit. People would come in and like they're obviously trying to get the best deal they can get, but they're not trained professionals, and so like you can buy cheap gear, but you have to know how to use it really well, or to have the stuff, like people, they have commercials using your phone or whatnot, but they have really good lighting, really good production and storytelling. So there's a lot more than just the camera that goes into it. And I'm like, if you're just going to use auto, the better auto is on the more expensive camera. If you don't want to do anything, buy the more expensive one. So it was kind of a catch-22 there.
Well, that's like the Blackmagic cameras, because they don't have autofocus. They're cheaper, but you're gonna work harder now because you have to like a battery option for the camera. You're gonna have to manually focus it, so it's now more complex for cheaper, which is in some ways actually a good thing because now you learn everything. However, if you're working on a documentary, Blackmagics are not particularly great. They work, but they're not great because there's a bunch of features on them that they pulled out in order to make them cheaper, which is great. I mean, another thing that I'll add is that sometimes buying the cheap stuff doesn't mean that it won't work. It just means that you're going to have to be much more careful. So like some of the gear that I have in the van, like I won't really hand it off to somebody else because I'm like, I bought the cheaper version of it and I have to take care of it in order to keep it going for a while. Normally, once you start spending bigger and bigger dollars, those things become more and more bulletproof. Like let's just take for a camera example, the Canon Cinema Series, C100, 200, 300, 400, 500. Those ones are great because they're super tough, super durable. You spent a lot more money on it. However, I've seen those things take tumbles and fall off and get hit and get water spilled on them, and they keep going. That's because you spent $6,000 to $10,000 on the camera, so it's going to have a higher durability.
And you probably won't have to replace it as soon because they don't have turnovers on the higher end gear as often.
Yeah, there's
like an iPhone. There's every year
a documentary series about a drug cartel, but I remember watching the interview where they're using a Sony. It's previous from the FX series, but like one of the older cameras at this point, like 8 to 10 years old, but they're using it now, and the footage looks beautiful. And there's the interview with the guy who was doing the documentary. He's just like, I've used it I know how it works. I know I can make a good image. Why do I need the newer one? Until there's something I need. He said, I'll get it when I need it. I didn't need it for this shoot, so I'll just use the one that works for me.
The guy I was white labeling through, he has two C100 Mark IIs, super old cameras, but their image is really good.
Oh, it's one of my favorite body designs of a camera ever.
It doesn't, have the best focus because it's only like that small little center focus area. There's lots of little drawbacks. So I did have to work hard, but it still has, really good image, especially for 8 megapixels or whatever it is.
It's amazing. Yeah. I love that camera.
But when I got my full kit, I guess, for interviewing, which is, I spent about $15,000, but I probably didn't need all of that. But anyways, let's say $10,000 for my full kit. Everything was good. I stopped being interested in gear for a while. I mean, there's still some step ups. I want to get nicer lenses and stuff like that. But It was just like, I have everything that I need. I mean, have you felt that? Have you felt like you're good?
No, my wish list on B&H Photo is probably $70,000 worth of stuff on a well, because I just see like, oh, there's that. Because I know I literally just talked about how,
including a box truck.
yeah. So there, you never will get to the point where there's not stuff that you want. Yeah. At least for me, I wish I was content in that way, but I'm always looking at like little things of like, ooh, if only I had that. Especially for me at the current moment. So I work with a Blackmagic Ursa G2, which is working really good. Like I'm in that spot. It works really good for me. It's just in that spot of like, this isn't new and exciting anymore. I have dirt in places I can't get out in it anymore. It's just not shiny. And there's a little bit of a feeling of like, oh, I want something else. Feels a little bit like rejecting your old date or something like that for something new. But it works really good. I'm going to try to stick with it for as long as I can. Yeah. But here again, here's an interesting one with gear though, is that I'm pretty positive I've lost gigs because I'm using a Blackmagic camera that's a little bit older. And I think there's optics to what you use. The bigger cameras will sometimes legitimately get you on a shoot because it looks more professional.
Which is why people buy so much rigging and stuff for their,
and I mean,
shoulder rig or shadow box.
And I've been told before that I've been hired on to shoots to set up bigger rigs only to make sure the client knows, because I get this side. So only showing up in order to show the client that this is where their money's going. But I understand it from the perspective of if you don't do video and you spend $50,000 on one day and some dude shows up with 3 people, a camera on a tripod, and a very minimal gear, you'd just be like, where did all of my money go? So sometimes, this is so dumb, sometimes I've gotten brought on literally to build stuff up and they'll use it, but there was a simpler solution just to add this appearance to the client and also comfortability. When people show up with a lot of gear and they know how to set it up, it probably means that they know what they're doing. So the bigger camera, the bigger lights, the more audio is all there for a reason. However, sometimes it's an optics game.
I have, after the T3i, I got the A6500 in Sony. I switched over to Sony. And that's, 4K does great stuff, good autofocus.
But the magentas, bro.
That's true.
Anybody who's used that camera just knows that every shot you just would have to slide green, slide green, slide green.
Make presets for everything you do anyways. And then the second camera I got was the A7S III, much better. But even still, I would prefer to use that over the C100 Mark IIs when I was white labeling through that company. But he wanted to impress the client. He wanted the bigger gear with the microphone attached and whatever, bigger stands. And even though my gear was way better, but now when I do my own interviews and I pop on my little A6500 on a tripod, I'm like, oh man, I just need an FX6 to replace that real quick.
Yeah.
Because it can be, but it still is really good shots. They actually don't color match as well as you would think. But anyways, that's beside the point. So for someone just getting into it, like how much should they save up to get started?
I think,
because we're saying big numbers here, but that's years down the road.
Yep. I think you could get away, and this is like scratching the bottom, maybe $2,000 to $3,000, and that's like off of the top of my head, that's probably buying like a used Blackmagic camera, the Pocket 4Ks, one of those used, and probably just buy like a package that somebody's just trying to get rid of, because lots of people will get rid of everything at once, so then you can save yourself hundreds of dollars on stuff because they're going to take the $30 battery and the cage and the whatever, and they're just going to essentially count those as losses inside the package. So you could potentially get one of those for $1,200. You buy yourself a $100 tripod, and then you get yourself the wireless Goes, and now you're really well set up and spend whatever extra money you have on some lighting gear. I mean, so like one of the basic lights I really like to recommend people right now is the Amarand Cobb lights, and they're bicolor, which is amazing. 150 watt little lights that have bicolor Bowens mount, and I would say that you'd get a very solid setup with a Pocket 4K, small rig, tripod, a wireless lav setup, and a couple, like one of those lights.
Yeah, and then you're rocking.
You're rocking.
And that would pay for itself in a year.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah, and I would actually throw it out. It depends on who you are and who you know. Here again, none of that stuff pays off if you don't know anybody who can actually pay you.
But even doing like $500 to $1,000 gigs with small businesses, mom and pop shops, you could still, I mean, yeah. You could still,
and my thing I would throw out to somebody though is, especially on those smaller things, do the first couple for free, because you don't need that stress of having to deliver something and then somebody being upset. Because like, as a personal thing, if I spent $500 for somebody to go do something at my house and it was okay or bad, I would be pretty upset. And so you have to think of it that same way when somebody's paying you. Like, you view it as like, man, I spent 4 weeks on this. This $500 is going nowhere. However, someone else paid you $500 and they're looking at it like, oh my gosh, I got crap. So if the first couple that you do with that setup, I would say maybe try to do it for free. Work out some of those kinks for yourself of like how to do things and communicating with people. What is expectations versus how you actually get a final project. And then do a couple of those, and they might actually want to pay you to do something later.
So one of the last things I want to talk about is how to buy this gear. Like, what are some tips and tricks you've learned about, one, researching and knowing exactly what you're getting, but also where to go to get this stuff? And you mentioned one of them, buying used stuff, but like, where would you get some of this used stuff?
Yeah, so one of my first spots, in the likelihood, and it depends on where you live and stuff, but the likelihood of it being there is very low, but Facebook Marketplace. Because a lot of times then, if it's local, you can go check it out. If it's used, make sure that it's okay. And even you can do the shipping options and stuff. And a lot of those services like eBay and Facebook Marketplace, they'll have a return policy as well if for some reason you get a really bad product. But
especially for the buyer.
Yeah, for the buyer. For the seller, it can be a bit annoying. But you can start there, and then even websites like B&H and Adorama, they have used sections as well. So you can go in, and it's not going to be a great discount. It might be like 5-10% off, but they have used sections as well. So you can go in and look up your item and look up the used section, see if it's in there. Otherwise, you can then go in and try to buy it. I do buy quite a bit of stuff off of Amazon as well, because sometimes they are a little bit more competitive than B&H. I just like B&H because their customer service is really good.
I will say with lenses, you might find a cheaper price on Amazon, but it won't have the warranty because it'll be an international version.
Yeah.
So just be careful with that. But there is often really good deals on there, and a lot of starter kit or even professional stuff on there.
Oh, totally.
KEH is a used place, used camera. There's lots of rental places that sell some of their older gear as well. If you've got a local camera store, they've got usually a used section, and they may even be willing to work with you just because they are passionate about it. They want you to have gear.
Yeah.
Because they know that probably will draw them back to buy more later. So what about like researching? So let's say lights.
Oh yeah, research.
There's so much to know, and I remember buying a light off Amazon that was just like a little shoe mount light on top of my camera, but it was totally off color, like pure magenta almost.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's actually a couple resources on YouTube that I will watch them religiously whenever they have a video come out. One's called Gaffer's Salon. He's a gaffer out of New York. And then another one is Andrew Locke. He's a gaffer in Sydney, Australia. But both of those guys, they'll review tons of gears and they'll get way more into the specifics about everything. And but it's really helpful because here again, I pretty much will never get my hands on a piece of gear before I buy it. Now I can return it if I don't like it. However, man, to throw out $2,000 and be like, oh man, how now that money's going to be held up for 3 weeks because it's in its return process and whatnot, and just the trouble of unpacking it, repacking it, all of that. But those guys do a lot of reviews and they'll be pretty honest about stuff. So, I mean, YouTube reviews is just amazing because people will kind of suss that stuff out.
Local community groups on Facebook, asking them, I think they've got some good feedback. Some people may be biased. Yeah,
I was actually going to throw out, I find that Facebook is not the best place because you get a lot of like, what's it called? Fanboys that will just defend their products no matter how poorly it works.
But if you didn't want that, I mean, B&H has really good customer service. Sweetwater has really good customer service.
Yeah, for Sweetwater for audio. Don't ask them about any of their video stuff. But audio-wise, they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Or even just go into a local store and just ask questions, like Guitar Center or something. They won't have everything, but they're,
get you an XLR cable.
Yeah. And then just doing the research. If you read the description, I always look at the specs, and if there's a description there, there's something I don't know, like what is lux versus lumens or something like that. I'm going to look that up, make sure I know that it's measured at 1 meter versus the one that's saying it's measured at 3 meters. It's like, that's a big difference. So just little subtleties you have to be able to pick up on and stuff like that.
Oh, for sure.
Just because obviously we both have bought stuff that we didn't use or was garbage.
Yeah. I would say now it's actually a lot easier to find reviews and stuff on products beforehand to get all that information out beforehand. Because I definitely, and this was more buying smaller things, but I've probably bought like maybe good couple $100 worth of little lights that you just kind of get out and use it the first time and like, this is kind of cool. And then I have pieces where I've never objectively thought like, oh, that's horrible. However, 5 years later, I'm like, I never touched that since I got, like, I have this little one light that was RGB that I was like, this is so cool. Never, I literally haven't used it a single time, and I think I just gave it away and it was $70. So it was a little bit of like, oh, okay, that was poor choice. But
we started off saying like the best camera is the one you have. How do you feel about phones?
Phones?
Yeah. Audio wise, camera wise, lighting wise, all that stuff.
Do I have to comment on that? No. I know it's a massive direction. I think it's hard. It's just the old manism of like, well, if it's not film, it's not good. Like a little bit of Tarantino in there. But, oh man, phones. I don't think I have the biggest opinion besides not really wanting to use them myself. But I have helped people get
Have you used them?
No, not really.
You haven't cut any shots in?
No, I've never. I have personally never used iPhone footage.
I try to teach my clients a little bit of video so that they can do some self-generated content because I can't be there for everything.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's good enough to cut in on a few things these days. Sometimes you get the really garbage one that you're like, why? Because it got texted like 20 times and then it's so diminished. And
it's just destroyed. Yeah, but I mean, the cool thing is they have audio mics now for $30 that hook up onto a phone that can be a little bit lapel. I think that's my biggest thing if somebody is going to do stuff with their phone is then 100% make sure you have audio. Yeah. Don't record it off of the phone. 100% get some way of getting the audio off of the phone.
You can say that for cameras too, because their little tiny little pinhole microphone is not, and their amplifiers are usually not made for audio. They've gotten better, especially with the emphasis on video these days. But back on the T3i days, no.
Funny story about those ones is I remember they had an auto gain feature that you couldn't control the gain in camera. So what I did is I soldered together a wire and had a little MP3 player that would generate white noise into one channel, so then the other channel would stay consistent. Such a stupid workaround. So stupid. It was so many wires just to make the audio stay consistent and still terrible.
What about, you mentioned a little bit of DIY gear.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I bought like a $4 black backpack, found an old foam sleeping pad, stacked it, glued it, cut it out to try to make my own little camera case.
Oh, nice.
I used it twice because it was just so pathetic.
Bad.
Yeah. But it was, I did it. I remember some other DIY projects I tried to do, but generally I didn't like the stuff I was making. So but it can be good.
Yeah, I'd say really the only area for me that DIY stuff has worked pretty well is in lighting wise. Because actually a lot of lighting gear is taken from other industries. So even the name Gaffer comes from sailing, which a gaffer was the guy who maintained the sails, maintained the material. So a gaffer is somebody who uses materials. Normally, so there's the gaffer and grips are the ones who use it and blah, blah, blah. But anyways, all that said is that they're using materials from other industries and turn them into what they need for film work. But like one of the things, and I mean, I use it all the time, is a bounce board, which is essentially a piece of foam that I got from Home Depot for $7. But I just kind of cut it to the 4x4 frame that I want and then taped all the edges. And it's a DIY thing, but holy cow, that is one of the most useful things I have. I mean, it gets used more than lots of other things. Another thing that I did initially was I got PVC pipe, made a frame, and then got, I don't think it was shower curtain, but on Amazon for like $10 you can buy diffusion material that you can cut out, and made it fit the frame. It was just pieces of PVC tube that had a diffusion piece on it. But there you go, a 4x4 frame for, I don't know, $30 versus 120.
Cool. I love it. So yeah, thank you for sharing all your wisdom and tips and everything like that. Golden nuggets. If you find a golden nugget, trade it for gear. That's kind of how we work just to buy gear. Forget food. But yeah, so that's episode 4. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, go watch the other videos on the YouTube page. And if you have any comments, you can email at hello.indiefilmhub@gmail.com. And you can check out the show notes and links to Jeffrey's social medias and stuff like that, if you're okay with that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. On Indie Film Hub. All right. Thanks, guys. Actually, do you want to share share it on here, your social medias?
Oh, yeah. Really, the only one that I use very much is the Instagram, which is at @JEdwardGriffith. So that's probably the best one to find me at.
And you've got 2 websites, one for the gear.
Oh, yeah.
And one for DP.
Yeah, so I have my DP website, which is www.jedwardgriffith.me, and that's for my DP work. And then for grip rentals, it is www.griff-grip.com.
Cool. Thank you. See you guys.